Hello, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitsu Lab, and in this video we're going to learn a little bit about boxing like your granddad. Now, WW2 Combatives is one of my big passions alongside Bartitsu and bare knuckle boxing, and I wanted to go through some of the boxing of the 30s through to the 50s, some of the signature ways of moving and hitting, so you can factor that into your own WW2 Combatives training. As I've mentioned in other videos, nearly everyone that is training in the Army, the Air Force, Home Guard, Commandos, wherever you are, there'll be a big cultural awareness of boxing, in that boxing was much bigger on the radio. You'd go see it at the cinemas, you'd go as a young man to the boxing booths where you'd compete against people for money. It'd be a fun, normal, socially acceptable and socially active enterprise. Boxing would be part of everyday life. So many people, even if they wouldn't consider themselves boxers, would know how to box. So it's an important way. You need a foundational understanding, I believe, of boxing to fully grasp and understand and enjoy WW2 Combatives. And you get lots of guides that are written by boxers, such as Jack Dempsey in his manuals. So there's some good things to play with there. But in boxing like your granddad, I'm just going to go through some of the signature elements, especially in terms of British and Commonwealth fighters. So one of the main things you'll notice is the size of the gloves. Now, do you see these gloves here? Now, I'm a heavyweight boxer, and as a heavyweight boxer in the 1930s and 40s, this is what I would have fought in. This is the type of glove and the type of weight. Laced, as you can see here, unattached thumb, horsehair padding. So again, you know the difference when you get hit with horsehair compared to modern foam, I'm telling you. So this is this kind of instruction. You do have these kind of closing bars here, so they're nice and comfortable in the grip. They're not quite as unpadded as, say, gloves from the 20s or the early 1900s. They do have padding in them, but you'd consider these anywhere between the 4 and the 6 ounce region, relatively common boxing glove. Compare that to what I box commonly in today. So this is a glove that I would box in today. This is a World War II era style glove, and I've got lots of others too. For example, these are my granddad's sparring gloves. So this would be the equivalent of a sparring glove, a little bit chunkier, a little bit heavier. This would be a good example of a fighting glove. So again, even there are differences between sparring gloves, fighting gloves, and the gloves of today. Now what you'll find historically is that guards for European fighters are typically still a little bit more extended, and the fighters are a little bit more upright. You find that American fighters had started to work a lot more down low, different guards, tighter guards. They were boxing in this type of fashion. British fighters of the period, it's not universal because every fighter fights in their own unique way, but as a general rule, European fighters were still relatively upright. They're relatively upright, and the legacy of the bare knuckle era and the early era meant that the hands were still somewhat extended. Not fully extended and supinated as we might see in period sources from, say, Bartitsu, early pugilism and so on. We don't have this type of matter, but what we do have is some legacy of that in the extension of the guard. The extension or the use of a probing arm or probing arms still happens a lot. And the fighters are relatively upright, still relatively bladed in a fencing style format. Whilst you see people move their heads a little bit more now, their feet are still relatively squared up. They're still moving in a fencing style format because a lot of the coaches of people at this time would have grown up in an era that's a little bit more pugilistic. So you've got guards. Now, you don't need to teach you to suck eggs here. Often people that are right-handed, their left arm and left leg is forward, like so. And if you're looking for like 1930s, 1940s flavour, it's somewhat extended, and many people still had some degree of supination on the front arm. Again, a leftover from the bare knuckle or light gloved era. And the right arm often is seen to travail back down to covering the mark. Whilst people are a bit sweeter in covering their face, as we move through to the 40s, there's still some legacy elements of covering the mark too. But anywhere around here, relatively common, and the fighters moving in that kind of fencing style footwork, their lead foot, their lead toes pointing towards the opponent. Okay, so you've got this kind of motion here. Now if we look at, so extended guards, very important. Fencing style footwork, still very important for people. You've then got essentially milling motions. Milling motions are the small circular motions with your hand. Again, a leftover relic, and you see it increasingly decline up into the period, but it's still common. It's still common. If you watch early footage of soldiers training for World War II, you see them box, you see them move. Milling is still an important part of what they do. Again, because we're not massively miles away from eras where milling was mainstream. So the notion of milling is that the hands are already moving, albeit unpredictably, if you're doing it well. The hands are already moving to some degree. So if you imagine these hands moving at 10 miles an hour, getting from 10 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour is much faster than 0 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour. So whilst this might keep you a little bit safer, your acceleration is naturally going to benefit from some degree of motion already. So the notion of milling, so what may confuse people as well is that milling is a motion, so moving the hands in unpredictable ways to find opportunities, to keep loose, to increase speed and to find angles. So I might mill, just come outside of his guard, bam, and fire that shot in. The milling opens up little angles for me to fire the shot. An angle that I can't get here, if I mill a little bit to the outside, wham. So you know I can't get it, I mill outside, wham, I can suddenly get that shot. So we've got the word milling for that, but also in British military parlance, milling is where two opponents for 30 seconds, 1 minute, or 90 seconds, depending on what regiment and what trend, will put on gloves, beat fuck out of each other. No defence, no boxing per se, but to develop attributes, to develop grit, toughness, offence, to see if you've got what it takes. So milling, and milling is still done by the parachute regiment today. You put on your gloves, you get in the ring, you fight. You don't move, you don't dance, you don't parry, you don't block, you fight. And that's an important function too. But in this instance, I'm talking about milling, the motion of the hands. Okay, so we've got uprighted, more bladed stances. Still somewhat elongated guards to keep the opponent at bay, to block more readily. Bear in mind a smaller glove. So I can catch, I can parry, I can cover, I can smother a bit more effectively than say a closed loop system like a modern glove. I've got more dexterity with these hands, so I can block and parry and move in more inventive ways. So if my hands are already out here, my ability to block, smother, cover is much better. So there's good benefit in my hands being somewhat extended. Okay, so we've got a bladed stance, an extended guard, a degree of milling. Our lead off is still typically, in many ways, done with a vertical fist. Boom! And a drop step here. So, hitting with the left hand with a vertical fist, still relatively common for the period. Again, a kind of a legacy from a bygone age where vertical fist was much safer for the hand, punching bare knuckle. Makes a lot of sense, and a lot of the coaches continued it for the lead jab. You'll see that Cuban boxing coaches keep this on today because it makes a really good way of slipping through the guards of tighter opponents. Okay? Then you move your way through the basic shots, and they haven't changed much at all. So if you imagine you've got your jabs, you've got your rear hands, so your rear hand, turning your hips like this, so turning your shoulder, turning your hip, bang. Lead off or jab. Some people threw them vertical, others flicked them out horizontal. The era was a time of transition. I prefer to build in the vertical for gloved and ungloved reasons. From here, and again, if you've got that extension, makes for quite a nice, efficient blow, keeping the hand somewhat supinated here. And fits in nicely behind the ear, along the jawbone and what have you. You've got your rear hands, which tend, just like today, nice and grounded. Moving here, boom, turning the body into it, nice and simple. You've got your hooks, here, here. Much like today, the trend seems to be for the body, vertical fist hooking. For the head, horizontal, a slightly wider hook, rolling the knuckles, like so. Typically, I'd advise tilting the thumb a little bit down, so you end up getting the knuckles on target, but anything from here to here, bang, 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 nice and simple. To the body, bang, bang. It's a lot more comfortable to be hitting with a vertical fist. So far so simple. You're not here to learn the basics of boxing. Jab, cross, hook, hook, body hook, body hook, uppercuts. One noticeable feature of earlier boxing of World War II, is that uppercuts, people tend to be a bit braver in throwing longer, more looping uppercuts. So today we tend to get very close. Historically, people would often throw almost like an upside down jab. And where the frame rate is terrible on this camera, so I'll move super slow. Bang! Firing it almost like an upside down jab. Bang! From here, longer looping uppercuts were a bit more common. Okay, so far, so simple, nice and easy. Some features which haven't lasted that long but are very useful is being able to simultaneously parry and riposte. So that is being able to cover, catch a punch, and deliver your own. Bang! From here, so I catch a punch and I deliver my own. From here. From there. You also get cover, so cover and punch, catch and punch, block and punch. And that can be with either hand. Bang, bang, bang. But the act of simultaneously defending and attacking was very common then, was even more common in the earlier periods. Simultaneous parry and defend. Simultaneous parry and defend. Cover and hit, parry and hit, or catch and hit. So parry, slapping it out of the way, catching it, taking it on the inner of the glove. You may cover by using a cross arm block. Boom, boom, which is quite good because it covers both sides. You notice the arm that's crossing, I'm covering this side of my jaw and this side of my jaw. 1, 2, 1, 2. So catch, parry, we slap it, or we may block it, and that might be just a solid cover. From here, so we may just cover, having our knuckles on our forehead. Or we may decide to actively, again a bit of a relic of the era, do harder forearm style blocks. Out, out, down, down. These are still used in the period. Block and hit, block and hit, block and hit, block and hit. But you get a lot more, compared to today, simultaneous parrying and riposting on the same beat. On the same beat. On the same beat, whether it's a cover, a parry, a stop, a block. They often happen at the same time. You also see things such as the leverage guard, so that's covering with the arms straight up. So you're moving past the punch here with the leverage guard, and then you're firing your shot in. So again, you're seeing that too. Covering yourself this way to parry, and then respond and then riposte. You also see clinch fighting, and again, holding people in chancery. People spent a lot more time back then still discussing infighting. The grappling in the matches went on a little bit longer than you tend to get today. People, for a TV spectacle, don't like this wrestling of attrition. But in the boxing of the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, you've still got that history, that heritage of chancery, being able to grab the head, move under the arms, wrestle people a little to open up an opportunity to fire a shot. So being able to grab the head's important. One of the key principles is keeping the elbow in line with the solar plexus. So you can drag, move, rag them around, smother their good arm, and smash them up. But holding and hitting is a signature key. Then naturally, you've got dirty fighting. You can get away with it more in the era of radio and newspapers than you can with 8K Super HD cameras. You can get away with it a bit more. So some of the common fouls of the era. Palming. So palm straight to the face. There's no padding here. Right here. Thumbing. You notice I've got an articulated thumb. So the thumb can get into the eye, nice and easy. Whether it's long range, there's a pinch punch. I can't remember the name of the fighter. He had a very famous punch called the pinch punch, and he'd essentially punch and grip this way. I'll put the name in the comments. And he'd go for eyes, he'd go for the kidney. Nasty little fucker. He's in Matt Hammack's book. Pinch punch, bang, right to the eye, right to the kidney. Nasty stuff. But this articulated thumb allows you to do that at range, or when you're in this close-up grapple, just wipe a bit of the thumb into the eye. Nice and nasty. Naturally, you get headbutts, and I always advise treat these like a sneeze. Use your shoulder, use the hard centre part of your forehead, on the nose or lower. So, on the nose, on the jaw. If you're a bit smaller, on the collarbone, but either way, you're ramming this head down. Nice and simple. Nice and simple. You can get away with that a little bit more then. So palming, thumbing at range, thumbing in chancery, headbutting at close range, all really, really important at the time. A lot of people did it and got away with it. Rabbit punches, so throwing your hooks to intentionally miss, so you club him with your forearm or your fist around the back of the head. So you imagine I throw a looping hook and never intend to clock him with it. My plan is to clunk him around the back of the neck with the inner part of my forearm. You also get, at this range, kidney hammers. So you end up here. A lot of people would abandon body shots and just start to throw short, chopping with their forearm or the bottom of their fist, their hammer fist onto the kidneys. So again, people would mask up their uppercuts with kidney hammers. Nice, nice, nasty, horrible stuff. Now, obviously, some of those are illegal moves, but they were more commonplace, and some of the moves are a bit more traditional. But on the whole, the boxing includes the milling, includes some degree of supination. So the hands are moving, you're a bit more upright, the hands are somewhat supinated, the lead hand still typically hits with a vertical fist. You get a lot more simultaneous parrying, blocking and striking at the same time. Dirty fighting is a bit more prevalent, using the thumbs, digging in the hammer, because you've got more dexterity because of the smaller gloves. Dirty fighting with these types of gloves is much easier to hide and to do. And then you've got the different modes of practice. So you've got normal rounds, as you have today. You can box, you can train, do pads, do bags, and that's what people did. But they also do exercises such as milling, the fighting variant, 30 seconds, 1 minute, 90 seconds, in the ring, full offence to build that fighting spirit, that courage, that onward mentality. Now, obviously, if you want to take those elements and move them into gutter fighting, if you want to move them into defendo, you do want to get a good grasp of boxing, you do want a good mix around, you do want to be able to box with people and get used to being hit. That's important. You can't just focus on the past. You do need to get your ass to a boxing gym and eat some leather. You have to. It just makes sense. It's what you need to do. But outside of that, get used to some of the more 1940s style techniques, 1940s style punches, and there's lots and lots of really good books for that, and I'll put some of them in a list for you to see some of the signature hooks, signature jabs, signature techniques of boxers. I've got a couple of videos on my channels. I think it's Boxing Like the Champs or other bits and pieces where I've drawn from other books or the videos what different champions did at different eras, things that you can emulate and replicate. Once you've got that, practice milling formats, sparring formats, and importantly, if you're practicing this boxing for self-defense, start to wean yourself off the gloves and get used to what it's like to hit with bare knuckles. It does change the way you hit, change the options you have available to you in your knuckle discipline, so that is important, so make sure you clue yourself up on that. And also all the variables that self-defense boxing has, which normal boxing doesn't, such as multiple opponents, varying terrain, low light, uncomfortable clothing. Get used to being able to box in a heavy jacket. Get used to being able to box when it's dark. Get used to being able to box when you're in a stairway. All of these things will help your overall holistic approach when it comes to defender or gutter fighting. Can't recommend learning boxing enough. It's a brilliant ancillary tool to add into your mix and will help you add extra power to what you do with other striking techniques. For example, if you can cross, worth a damn, if you can fire body weight, if you can talk into it. The only thing that's different with your tiger claw is the drill bit. Your body, your drill, is the exact same. All that's changing is I'm going from the punch drill bit to the tiger claw drill bit. But the delivery mechanism and is exactly the same. So again, there's lots of crossover benefit. But hopefully you found that useful. Get to the boxing gym, go study old videos, have some fun and play with it.